Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer, and I'm your host. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I am so excited to be here together with one of my favorite people who's got such a transformational story. One of the most talented people I have the pleasure of knowing, and I cannot wait to dive into your story. Nikki Leonti.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I cannot begin to do your resume justice. Usually I like to go into all that, the accolades of my guests. The best way that I can describe what I know you to be is one of the most talented vocalists ever. And you've done so many things, starting with, was it 17 years old that you had a number one single on Christian radio?
It was 16 or 17. I had like 4 top 5 singles in a Billboard charting album at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year? What years was that?
Oh my gosh, so long ago. It was the end of the 90s era into the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Was when that happened. Yeah.
That was the height of the CCM
Yes.
days. Oh my gosh.
It was. I was just asked to do a documentary involving the height of like 90s Christian artists. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So you're at this place early, young. I mean, I think back to when I was that age. I can't imagine having the responsibility of being so visible, not only in with fame, but with fame attached to Jesus Christ and the mission of faith on top of it. And that's a pretty heavy mantle to carry for anyone, let alone being someone that's 16, 17 years old.
Right. Yeah, being worried about people's eternal destination all the time. Like it was, it's the focus. And if you found yourself thinking about, your gifts or what you do, like you would immediately feel shame, which I still have to rewire that. You immediately feel shame as to, it's not about me. I am not talented. I'm only
A channel.
I'm this vessel to, be a river that God runs through, and that is it. Like I am on my own unworthy, and there's beauty in that, surrendering to God and giving of yourself to others. But there was also like this clouded line that made you kind of lose yourself as well. So yeah, there was a heavy feeling.
So one of the things that you're describing, and that is a common thread throughout your story, and I would say a narrative that we like to speak to on this show a lot. The answer is not just black and white, but that in the light is all the spectrum of all colors. Mm-hmm. And so the way so many of us were raised was it's this either good and bad, black or white. And, as we grow older, and I would say some of us, we go through our rebellious stages, and then we go through our healing stages. We learn about the gray and what have you, but we like to talk here about like, it's not just gray. We then come to find that, there's color. Mm-hmm. And so when you are still in this place of the duality in every way, shape, and form of both your career and in your walk with God and your family, and, all things, what happened next? Because it was a very halting moment that changed everything overnight for you. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Yeah, I mean, I was a touring singer doing these big arena tours. I think at this time, I was doing like their winter jam thing where, 25,000 Christians come together, and I was a spokesperson for abstinence. I had done like the cover of these magazines and telling people, which was true at that time, that I will not even give out a kiss, other than my wedding day. I had these big visions for myself, but yet had never experienced relationship and love from someone. So I didn't come from a very informed place as far as what I would feel and what was happening. And so, the very first person to basically show me like real affection, whether or not he was a healthy person or not, became, something that I ran into pretty quick. And, it came from a childhood of trauma, a childhood of abuse, not having
his childhood or your
mine.
child?
So not having connected parents, not having parents who talked to me, who asked me questions, who hugged me, who did those types of things. So I meet this guy who has a lot of serious issues.
Can I backpedal for just a second? So I can't skip past that.
Okay.
Childhood.
Yeah.
Your parents didn't hug you?
No, my dad was a very disconnected man. Mm-hmm. He wasn't an affectionate man. And my mom, she could maybe hug me, but it was like not like a warm, not affectionate. Like it was the pat on the back,
How was love shown in your household?
Ooh. The only way I felt seen and loved was if I could sing and perform. It was my way of, it was survival. It was my identity was attached to it. It was like I had to do something grand because otherwise I don't fit in. My parents were musicians. My mom wanted to be a singer that, was known and all those things. So when I found myself with the gift at like 5 or 6, being able to do perfect pitch and different things, all of a sudden I felt seen in a situation where I didn't feel seen. I was seen by others, seen by the church, seen by a pastor, whatever. I started getting these feelings of attention and that I was valuable if I could bring something to the table.
So in a world where we preach unconditional love from a savior and that we're supposed to show this to each other, you're feeling that you're having to find what you will find what you need through performance.
Yeah. Conditional love was everything. I mean, not just as a performer, but as, a believer. Mm-hmm. It was based on performance as well. Mm-hmm. Everything was, being the family that presented a certain way and not having flaws and not talking about those flaws. I mean, it was parents who didn't talk about their past because God forgave them and all is good. Right. Parents who didn't affirm mental health because,
Parents who didn't talk about their past because God forgave them and all is good. Can I get an amen? I'm going to raise my hand. Mom and Dad, I love you, but it's true. And, those who are listening,
yeah. I mean,
it's a real thing.
It's a very real thing. And when
it's generational and it's in the church, it's not just one or the other. I mean, so.
Yeah. And when you have parents who aren't vulnerable and admitting like just basic human flaws, then that, thing you're trying to reach or that they're aspiring to be becomes something you'll never attain. Like I will never get to that place. Right. I thought they were a certain thing that they weren't.
I think I always say this. I firmly believe that my parents were doing the best they could with what they had.
Yes.
But it took me until, I don't know what age, it was past 30, that I got to the point where I realized my parents, where I literally remember thinking, oh, they are just human. Like, do you remember getting to a spot where you had that realization too?
Yes. It was my first therapy session.
Oh.
Yeah. I had been dealing with eating issues and I had been spiraling in ways throughout my life, picking whether it was being addicted to the wrong relationships, whether it was trying to get control of my eating, whatever it was, I was acting out in ways because I had never really acknowledged that I was a victim of anything, for one, and never acknowledged the trauma of my childhood.
Right.
And, you know, I sat with this lady in Sherman Oaks, California, and I told her like my upbringing, told her where I'd come from, what I was dealing with, and then, you know, essentially being kicked out of the Christian music industry for a teen pregnancy. And I felt like I was this inherently bad person. Like it was in my, like I had done wrong. I did the church wrong. I did, you know, I would say that in interviews, you know, the biggest part was, you know, failing, you know, the God of the universe and failing myself. It was just so deep and so shameful in how I felt about myself. And when I unraveled these things about what I had been through, and I shared about my parents, I shared about, like we're talking about these opposites and dualities and things. And she looked at me and was like, you know that, you know, none of this is your fault, for one, and that you're a victim to traumas. You have complex trauma and just all of these things that I'd never heard from anyone before. And then I realizing, she's like, do you know that the way they were operating is unhealthy? Do you know that's abuse? And I couldn't even take that throughout like my 20s and teens and really ever admit that I was in an abusive situation, because I was really successfully programmed to believe this lie of this thing we were trying to do as these, you know, the religious pillars of our community or whatever it was. You know, it was something that I never quite grasped and accepted. And I honestly started not dealing, you know, I started dealing with things then and dealing with maybe anger I didn't know I had. It came out later.
Absolutely.
Like 15 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to work its way to the top one way or another. So I want our audience, people tuning in, to keep in mind here as we're talking about, you know, that I love the family systems approach. I think it's so important because, you know, it helps us navigate like, hey, where'd I come from? You know,
right.
There were some attachment, from the sounds of things, some attachment issues from the beginning as a result of trauma that kind of drove what we're going to get into later on. So keep in mind the importance, and I don't know the specific, there's a time frame and what they say is important, but that we, when it comes to attachment theory, that we have to have from birth to a certain age to be held, hugged, reinforced that mom and dad or primary caregivers are going to be there no matter what. And if we don't have that, it comes out in other ways later in life. Okay. So we've established this. There's some attachment stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So
this feels like a therapy session.
I know. And I'm sorry, but you know, angle.
No, when you said that, when I was thinking of like those formative growing up years, you know, there were several of those years that my brother was dying of cancer. There was almost 3 years of that. So my older brother and I were fostered for all those years from people in the church.
Wow.
And they would separate us. And so I went to like 50 or 60 different households, and whoever would take us. And, you know, charismatic church people, one to the next. I've got stories, you know.
Nikki, how old were you?
Oh my gosh, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Just going from not having family, not having parents around, going from a place to the other. But when you said that, I brought up like, yeah, there's things that get established when you're not connected to your caregivers, you know.
Your brother, how old was he? Older than you?
He was younger. So he passed at 6.5 years of a rare muscle cancer.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I don't know what level of reverence to give that, but I mean, I can't imagine losing a sibling.
Yeah.
That's too young.
It's too young. Yeah. And there's so many questions and emotions to navigate. But, you know, therapy wasn't as accepted and talked about then as it is now. So like our needs as siblings weren't really taken into account, or like the grief or I remember just being like, God, I hope he accepted you before his death. Like a little boy, like fears and so many things that came up because of the lack of someone sitting and saying, how do you feel? You know, as a child, what is this doing to you? Why, you know, I started becoming afraid of death. Like it was going to be me, or like just facts or friends. They didn't share, you know, things with me at the time that made me further kind of spiral into where I was headed.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting you say that, because I remember, I mean, I don't have a similar death story, but at a young age having a very strong fear of death as well. Yeah. So my gosh. All right. So we're going back to the place where record deal, top of the charts, you get pregnant.
Yes.
But who, without naming names, right? Can you describe how did you come across this dude? Was the connection made? Did you know, you weren't informed? What happened?
I met him during Gospel Music Association Week downtown, and he was in a Christian band as a guitarist. And he, you know, he had dark hair, like an Italian in my family. Mm-hmm. And so he looked familiar, you know, that's all I basically knew then. As far as how to pick someone, I wasn't like taught like about looking for character, what is important to you, or you're valuable and how someone should treat you. Mm-hmm. I had none of that in me to be able to go, oh, this guy's lying to me right off the bat. And I would catch him in these things. Right. But I had a codependency situation already with my mother. He was a mentally ill person and I took care of after my brother's death, you know? And so he was my first relational choice that was like a caregiving situation for me. And so I'm like, I make money, I can help him, I can give to him, I can do that. And so it was a natural choice for me to pick someone who had a broken wing. Yeah. You know, I was very comfortable with that. And so we decided, after I found out I was pregnant, I met him, and I think it was within 12 weeks I was pregnant. Pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I remember him lying to me about something, but the feeling of a warm body near me was so important. And I'd never had that before. He was my first like person to hold me. I remember waking up like, whatever this is, however bad it is, I can't ever leave this feeling of what it feels like to be like loved, or what I felt was love, and to have someone near me. And so we got married the next week after I found out I was pregnant, because I was again trying to make it right in the eyes of man and God.
That's what you did at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did like this shotgun wedding in California, and things unraveled pretty quickly from there. He had a sex addiction, and so that just started to peep up in every corner of our lives, from just wild stories. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and he's talking on a sex hotline next to me in bed.
And nobody, even today, because I work for a company where we treat sex addiction.
Yeah.
I have people ask me all the time, sex addiction, is it really, come on. Is it not just a high, what is it called? Arousal template, which is what they refer, no. Sex addiction is a real thing. But back then, you did not hear about, you might hear about sex addiction in the church, because we came from a point of, that's a demonic spirit,
Right, exactly. Well, that's how I was told to handle it. It's like, we can pray this out of him and we can deal with this. But it started going into illegal things. He's getting arrested for public displays of this in several arenas, whether it's peeping Tom or, revealing himself in front of people. So that was happening during and then after. I don't know how he's doing today.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of illegal activity, and it became abusive and overwhelming. And so by the time I was like 21, 22, I'm divorced.
Yeah.
21, I think.
It was, what age was it when you got pregnant again?
18.
18.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go back through this timeline. 18, you get pregnant, and you find out, how far along were you when you found out?
I mean, I think a couple months, I think. It was my hairdresser here in Nashville. I had told her, she's the only person I told. And she's like, Nikki, because I had never been taught about sex. I didn't know how to get pregnant, how it happened. I only, saw pictures of how a human body grows through the years. And I knew that you got more hair with each 10 years. That's all I knew. And so, I mean, I didn't know about ejaculation. I didn't know how things worked.
Yeah.
He said, don't worry, you can't get pregnant, and I just didn't know. I didn't know.
Of course you trusted the first person that came along and provided you the attachment you needed as a human being you found peace and comfort with.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Why wouldn't you trust that?
Right.
And so at this time and place in history, what happened with your career? Because I don't want to glaze over that and move past it. Right. So you're at the height of Christian music. Find out you're pregnant. What took place?
Well, it was something that I knew. And I think especially during that time, where like, if I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm pregnant, I'm going to be saying goodbye to this, especially the way it looked then. So I made the choice to just go ahead and tell my managers, I'm pregnant. I was on the road at the time, and had to tell everyone there. And so it was tough. It was like saying goodbye to this career I had built. I had been traveling for years at that point.
Did you know deep down inside that it was going to go away by being?
Yeah, I did. Because it was the good and evil. And, I saw Amy Grant get a divorce and what happened to her. And I'm like, oh, there's just no way that this is going to be okay. But I tried, and I did like an apology tour and tried to come out with new music. But at that point, none of the radio stations, not none, I don't want a blanket statement. There were only a few that there could never really be any forward motion anymore in it. And there weren't enough places that would book me, and people that would take, I was considered a risk, and even told that, like, you're a risk to us. And I mean, I remember I'm in bed vomiting every day because I'm pregnant and feeling terrible. And one of the biggest teen leaders that did huge arena tours called me, and his platform is teenagers. So you have someone who's a teenager who needs help. Me, I wasn't just the singer who was on the radio, and he called me up and he said, you are a disgrace to our platform. And I can't believe I trusted you. I can't believe, we even, let you on here. We trusted you with these kids and this stuff. And I'm just like, this guy has no idea what my life was like and what was happening. And it felt so shameful. And, they had a huge multi-million-dollar company that could have sent me a pack of diapers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like a teen pregnancy.
Yeah.
The most visible one that they could have helped at that time in the church world.
Right.
And there wasn't any resources or love sent my way. It was just this condemnation of who I wasn't and how I failed them.
So, first of all, I can't imagine what it's like to carry a baby, get pregnant in the first place, let alone being pregnant as a teen at that time with your platform. You mentioned that you knew, you had a knowing, but you had hope that maybe, some part of your career was salvageable. Did you consider an alternative to moving forward with the pregnancy? Oh,
at that time, yeah. I, when I first found out I was pregnant, I mean, the first things that came through my mind were, how do I hide this? You know, honeymoon baby.
Yeah.
You know, I had called a clinic and asked them what to do. And then I got, you know, I was scared out of that. And yeah, all the options go through your mind when you have, you know, managers and business managers and booking agents and a band and all these people who made money from what I did. So it's like, you know, how do I not have to deal with this?
Yeah. So you chose life, and you've got this beautiful daughter who's how old now?
22.
22.
Yes, and sings like a bird.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
To no one's shock. Yeah. Got her mama's pipes. So, you know, you move forward, you marry this man, and you kind of have already painted the picture for us that it was, there was danger involved. And police and the law, all the things. So at what point did you navigate or decide that you needed to navigate away from that situation, and what'd you do?
Yeah, it was volatile. I mean, things were getting to the point where, I mean, they were unraveling really fast, and he was getting more destructive, and he would undo something in my car, and I could only get a block before the car would stop, and I couldn't get away.
Was he keeping tabs on you, like where you were, and knowing, like he had to know where you were going to be or when you were going to be home, kind of thing? And that's what you're...
Yeah, I mean, he was, he felt me getting ready to leave.
Okay.
And so like we would be in the car, and I would be like, it's time, I have to, I can't be in this anymore. And he'd go, okay. He'd start driving the car, you know, 100, 105, 110. I'm going to go into the next tree. And I'm like, I'll stay with you. I'll stay with you. Like the abuse psychologically, and it was physical. And he would throw my keys in a field, and I couldn't get away. Like it was like an escape situation with him. And then one day his appendix ruptured, and I knew they were going to rupture because I had read on it before. I'm like, your belly button pain and the fever and you're throwing up, you're going to, you know, we need to get you to the hospital. And when he went, I called his mom and I said, can you come out here and help me when he recovers? Dropped him off at home from the hospital, and I took my daughter and I left at that point.
Gosh. You know, I recently heard a statistic, and I think, you know, it's wishy-washy on what it currently is, but that it's somewhere around 13 plus times it takes someone in a domestic violence situation 13 attempts to leave before it actually takes place.
That makes sense.
Baffled me.
Yeah.
As the person of privilege that I sit in, you know, with you know what I'm saying? You know, I cannot imagine, because I haven't been in those shoes. And, you know, as you sit here and describe that to me, it blows my mind what you went through and what that had to have carried with you and your daughter moving forward. So, your mother-in-law comes.
Yeah.
And I
take off. That's a very believable statistic, by the way.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're with someone and you're codependent and they're crying and saying they'll never do it again, and you feel bad and you want to see the best, there was a lot of things that got lost as far as what was good for me, what was safe for me. It became about, how do I make him better? How do I help him with his addictions and his issues? You know, it is hard to leave. And then you do, and then you're like, oh wait, but he needs me to get better. If I leave him, he's gonna do something to harm himself, and I don't want that to happen. You can't
be responsible for that.
So it does become a cyclical thing.
Gosh. So thank God you left.
Yes.
Right. You leave, and what happens next?
Well, I left an unhealed person who still had never walked into therapy and never acknowledged why I picked the people I did. And I basically met another guy quite quickly, and he wore golf shirts. So I thought he had his life together and was different.
Nikki, I have to tell you. Okay, so I know this about your story that golf shirts was what just made you feel that about this guy. And over the past 2 weeks, I have been in a couple scenarios where I saw a group of guys with golf shirts on. They had been doing whatever, and they had that look. You know what I'm talking about? They had that
the
look.
khakis and the iron little pressed
and
center.
I can't help myself, but every time I look and I think, gosh, I wonder how many young women or people are looking at these guys thinking, oh, he's got his stuff together. He's got his stuff together because he plays golf.
And
it's so clean. Look, and all
right.
these things. So I'm never going to look at a golf guy differently after knowing this about your story. So
yes,
you get together with golf guy,
and it progresses fast. And I'm married again. And I realized into the marriage that I had married an alcoholic. So I found someone else that needed me to help financially stabilize, which was, familiar of the first marriage as well. Even though it looked different, a little different, it was the same formula.
Yeah.
And someone who was disconnected emotionally, who had, been dealing with his own stuff and hadn't really grown up past a certain point because of his trauma and addictions and things like that. And so I wasn't equipped at all to be with him, especially as I had to figure myself out. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't even see or recognize what was happening at that point. Looking back, I go, oh, this is what was going on. But then in it, I wasn't seeing the unraveling. I wasn't seeing how the addiction played a part into our marriage. And so that I had another child, and that only was able to last a few years before that ended. So ending that, how did that compare to ending the last one? It was not as Lifetime movie as the first one.
Yeah.
For sure. But it became a very hard situation. So I had to come back to Nashville here and do a custody battle of my son. At that point, I had been touring right before that as Carrie Underwood's background singer as a means of survival because he was unable to hold a job down. So when they called me, hey, can you come on the road with Carrie? I'm like, well, that will answer a lot of our financial problems. Sure. Granted, I was devastated to have to leave my kids, but it was the only thing that I had that could pull us up. We were living in a hotel in Cool Springs, a motel place or extended stay, whatever. So I took this job. But in the end, when we went to a conservative courtroom, they were like, your choices as a musician feel very, fleeting and selfish and all these things. And so I ended up being the one that had to pay child support for over a decade to him. And he got primary custody, joint still, but he got primary residential. So I had to say goodbye to tucking my son in every night and doing life with him and knowing that, my situation was a better situation for him. It was really wild. And I ended up, getting my son back later in time. But that was an equally hard and crazy situation in its own right. And maybe harder, actually.
I can't imagine having my child taken, especially, and then my hardworking career being blamed as the reason.
It was the sole reason. I mean, they said you are not a threat to the child, harm, nothing like that.
Right.
It was just based on my occupation.
And this was here in Nashville that a judge made this determination.
Well, in Franklin. And you would have thought that they would have some type of understanding of my career, but it was not the case.
I already know the answer to this, but was this a male or a female judge?
A male judge.
Yeah. I ask that because I think it's important for people to understand, the levels of trauma that can go on for especially a female. Over and over and over, you're experiencing these repeated themes. How you hold out any hope for for connection and healthy relationship with a male beyond this point. I don't know, because like what, you know what I mean?
Right.
I look at that and think, you know, how I would, when do you raise the white flag and just say, I'll just be single for, you know?
I thought so. After that, I said that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I dated another addict at that point. But I wasn't wanting to get married or,
Yeah.
and it took, I think it was 8 or 9 years before I had gotten married again. And yeah, thought I had it figured out by then.
Sure. And, you know, you started, you've talked about so much that how you got launched into a career at such an early age. And then also being a mother, you know, all these things. You had more responsibility than most any teenager has, or even person in their 20s.
Right.
And so that 8 or 9 years, what were you doing professionally, and kind of like, where was your headspace?
Right.
You know, what transpired through that period of time?
That was leaving Nashville. I went to LA. I got a record deal with Warner Brothers. And I thought that would be the moment, you know, where I can show my kids, this is what, you know, this is why I traveled at that point. I was trying to prove something now, especially after what happened with my son. I'm like, I'm going to come back and have this amazing life to offer him and show them like this wasn't for nothing. You know, it became all these other reasons to succeed. And so I went there, signed a deal, you know, it happened fast. I was on, like, Ellen asked to introduce us and be the first to debut us on her show. I was on, like, Tonight Show. All these things started bubbling. And then, you know, I ended up being a part of a large group of people at the label that got kicked out of this label because of the change in ownership and blah, blah, blah. So I got lost in the shuffle there. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, I need to be in one place. I want my son back. I am the place he needs to be at. He's not in a good situation. So I quit. I was offered another big touring job around the world with this other big artist. And I said, no, I'm going to just take this little job in a hotel lobby in Hollywood. And I started working for Glee as a singer for them for 4 seasons. And so it was really cool because I thought I was going to miss out on something, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And by like choosing to do this little hotel show became a place where Prince and Stevie Wonder and Justin Bieber and the Jonases, like, they all came to perform with me and sing. And I got to, I mean, and that's just like a small fraction of the amazing, like, legendary artists that came through. And so while trying to rebuild my home, you know, I didn't miss out on anything awesome. It was almost like this blessing that came for kind of getting my life in order, you know, I felt like. And so, I did that, and I was dating at the time someone for many number of years, and that was something that I decided wasn't good for me, and started songwriting, you know, and songwriting became also this other avenue that I can work and be a mom. And so I found myself working on the Disney Channel for their Disney Channel shows and different movies and commercials. I've written for like Ford and Toyota and Victoria's Secret, all these different commercial spots and stuff. And so my career started taking on a whole new form. And a lot of times, you know, I made survival decisions, but it ended up becoming like my passion, and songwriting and writing, you know, became, you know, my passion to survive and to take care of my family. And I've been really blessed to be able to maintain in music for well over 20 years, 25 years probably.
Heck yeah.
Without having to ever do anything else. And that's a gift. I mean, people may not know who I am, but I feel like the biggest, like, success story are people that can, you know, make their life's work around their passions and what they love to do. And if you can do that and sustain, like, you're a success.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, I feel like this is the perfect place to interject. I'm not going to mention his name. We have a mutual friend who I was asking, after I had talked to you about, doing an interview for Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, can you think of anybody that would be a great person to interview for Mental Health Month? In this realm, in this world of things. And he mentioned your name, and I said, I love that you mentioned her. We're already scheduled to
Yes.
to record. I said, is there anybody else that you can think of as well? And he goes, no, none of them have done the work yet.
Wow.
And I thought that was very powerful. So,
that is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I didn't tell you that until now because I wanted it to be a genuine reaction. But the truth is, people know who you are. And I think one of the most beautiful things is that people don't only know who you are, but your story has gone on and will continue to go on in such a healing way to be triumphant, something that others can attach themselves to. When we talk about attachment, it's like, as a kid, you missed out on certain primary attachments that needed to happen, but then you found healing, you worked through what you need. And stories, as in the name of our podcast, are one of the primary ways that people can find attachment to healing.
Yes.
And yours is such a story of healing over adversity. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you because I think that, the fact that somebody else said that, I think is very powerful. And yeah.
I love that he recognized that I've done the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm at a place now where I can proudly own that and say, yes, I have done the work and I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
It's not, I didn't reach this happily forever after. It is a daily choice to continue to work on those things and to heal from those things.
Absolutely. So, all right. I know your husband, he's an amazing guy, right? I want to get to present day.
Yes.
And so, Mr. Ryan, you meet him.
Yes.
When was this?
I met Ryan in 2013 via Vine.
Vine.
And we were commenting. Someone at Glee had played him singing.
Uh-huh.
And my God, I heard his voice and saw his long black hair, and I was sold. He looks like Jared Leto. You got to meet this guy. And I was like, yes, I need to. And so we met, and things were super fast. And he was a man of great faith in God. And I was attracted to that. And that was something that was really different than what I had picked before. And so I thought, okay, this is the happily ever after story. This is the restoration that people talk about. This is redemptive. All these things. I thought now, this has to be smooth sailing after what I've been through. And that has been a very hard journey, but a very good one. So Ryan's very open about this, but Ryan's been sober for many years. But when we met, he wasn't. And I didn't recognize then that he was also an addict. And it was a situation of my codependency again, and love, obviously. There's that. I can't just, so much love for him. But it has, my instinct was correct, and that I married an incredible man who, despite what he's had to go through, works on himself.
Absolutely.
Too. So we both are working on ourselves. This one, despite the hard start and the issues that we both individually have to own and deal with, have moved forward together. And he does so much work on himself. And he goes to therapy too. And we go together. We go by ourselves. We do all of the work all the time. And it has proved to pay off in our relationship. And, I used to see my story as this girl who attracted bad guys and not an unhealed girl who, because of the brokenness and problems in me, picked people who had brokenness too. We all do. I mean, you know what I mean?
Exactly. That's
We're
where I
all
was going to go. I love the story of, because in the realness there is that we're all broken.
Yeah.
And the best way, in my opinion, that we connect is through our brokenness.
Yeah.
And I love that the today for y'all is that you know, I came into y'all's life in a place of such healing. And, you know, when I met Ryan, we bonded over, you know, our recovery. I always get so excited when I meet somebody else who's, you know, in that place, you know, like, hey, there's another unicorn.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome. It really, truly is. I think that, again, you know, to reiterate that you are a work in progress, I'm a work in progress, moving out from the inherited higher power that you had to one that, you know, I know that you still walk in a relationship with God, but forgiveness looks different. Healing looks different. You know, all of the things look different because of the healing that you've done rather than the bondage that started out. And so I just wanted to ask, you know, if you were to name the top things that come to mind that, you know, in addition to therapy, that have been tools that helped you heal your relationship with your higher power, that helped you heal your relationship with being able to connect and attach with people, and live joyful and a fulfilled life, what would those tools be?
Okay. The catalyst for that, I'll say first, was that I went to a 30-day place in Los Angeles when I was there. And I went there and was surrounded by trauma-informed therapy, EMDR, all these different tools I'd never heard of before. And I went because I reached that kind of rock bottom in what I was dealing with. And right before that, not long before that, I was on a plane that caught fire and then had dealt with my daughter had SIDS and I had to resuscitate her. And so because of that, I was diagnosed PTSD, but it wasn't, Yeah. And it was all the complex trauma of losing my brother, seeing my daughter die and have to bring her back to life. All that happened. And I went away because I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia. It caused massive amounts of anxiety. But it was the hardest thing that ever happened, but the best thing. And I went and these ladies like gave it to me, like gave me so much wisdom and information and a diagnosis with the PTSD and helped me like start peeling back the layers and getting the tools of, you know, leaving that was scary. Leaving 30 days of that help every day and doing that was scary back then.
Oh, yeah.
And
it still is today.
Yeah.
It's no less scary today for people when they leave that shelter of the bubble.
It was a bubble. Yeah. And they were like, keep a schedule, you know, stay on track with your therapy and with different things. So I didn't think I would come out of at the time or ever sleep again or ever kind of get my sanity back. But little by little, it was therapy, meditation, a lot of different self-care things, alone time, being able to write, being able to process, you know, in silence and a hot bath or music, like whatever it is. There's so many things that reconnect me. And my biggest thing was that I was living in autopilot for so long and wasn't recognizing the feelings you have in your body or the different symptoms that arise. And you're like, I didn't even know myself or connect to myself enough to recognize when I was breaking down and when my body was telling me to stop, to sleep, to, you know, take your supplements, whatever it is. Yeah. You know, I wasn't aware enough. And so the biggest healing factor has been, you know, knowing that I can connect in a situation, which I couldn't before.
Right.
There's things that people tell me, do you remember this back then? I have no idea. I wasn't living.
You would disassociate.
I was disassociating. Yeah. I was surviving. And now like I live in a mindfulness state. Like every moment matters. Being able to connect to people, ask them questions. I'm not just going, but I really am trying to be, and I have to remind myself I haven't mastered it. You're reminding myself to be aware, be present, recognize your body symptoms, know that, don't be scared when a symptom, I used to get scared, like, oh, what's this feeling in my body? I'm scared. Am I dying? No, that's because, the last week has been like this. It's just like having care for myself too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that work together to be able to survive and be functioning after a life like I've lived, and there's a lot of community aspects too, and people that you're able to reach out to and say, I need you. I love you. I need help. I need a friend,
Yeah. That's so good. Okay. So I want to encourage everybody listening, watching, if you aren't enacting any one of those things that Nikki mentioned, because they are so good, I encourage you to rewind and go back to all of those things she listed as helpful tools and write each one of them down and just give them a try, because they're all usful. No matter. Yeah. Oh yeah. And EMDR. Oh my gosh. If you're not in therapy, get in therapy. Such amazing advice. And I can't shout the reinforcement and encouragement from the rooftops louder. I love all of that so much. Among all of the gifts that you've given us, in addition to vulnerability and, sharing your tools and all of those things, I want to know if you would be willing to share your voice with us today, just for a moment, to spread a piece of that beautiful gift that God's given you.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. So one of my favorite songs of all time is His Eyes on the Sparrow. And I know that it was a very special audition song that you did back in the day.
Yes.
So would you be willing to give us a moment of that beautiful piece?
I will. I love that song. It's one of my favorite songs. Let's see. Let me get the right key here. Why? I think that would be it. Why should I feel discouraged? And why do the shadows come? And why does my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. So I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I am free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches. I know He watches me.
Yes. Oh, chills.
Out of nowhere.
My gosh. Thank you.
I sing.
I mean, and this is where we all stand. Yes. Thank you so much, Nikki Leonti. This has been such a gift. Final leaving thought. Person who has listened today, connected, said, I'm struggling, and identify with any part of your story. What last word of encouragement do you want to leave with them?
Wow. That there is the other side. There's another side to it, and that the emotions and feelings of not being able to make it are temporary. Like in any given moment, your emotions can really tell you that you're not going to make it through. And that's not the truth. And that there is, there's more in life. There's more to your story. And that any story can turn out amazing no matter how crazy it looks on paper. And mine looks really crazy on paper, really long, CVS receipt long, you know? And it keeps going and going. And you can find joy and happiness in a healthy story, in healthy partnerships and healthy friendships. And life can really turn around from the worst, darkest situation to be something incredible. It really can. And so I would just say, like, hold on. There's hope for you. There's love for you. And there is an amazing ending to your story.
Absolutely. Nikki Leonti, thank you so much. You can connect with Nikki and follow her on all the show notes below. We're going to have them listed for you. And I'm going to close out by reminding everyone, thank you again, reminding everyone that it is never too late to start loving yourself. And you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.